Hi folks, hope everybody's feeling well after the mini Droughtlander of last week. But now both the show and my videos are back again after a week of nothing, with not only the penultimate episode of the show's final season, which also makes it the second last episode of the show in its entirety, but also, this is episode 100. Now last week, things ended with Lord John being kidnapped by the turncoat scoundrel Richardson. Whatever's going to happen next? Let's find out. Episode 809, Pharos. Yes, that's Pharos, not Pharos, which totally I thought it was Pharos every single time I read it in the lead up to this episode. Right up until the moment when somebody said the word in the middle of the episode, I thought this was about Egyptian kings. Anyway, Pharos starts out with Lord John waking up chained and all mocket in a boathouse, and Richardson tells him that he's been kidnapped, so that he'll write a letter convincing his brother Hal to change a speech in Parliament that was going to be anti-war into being pro-war, so Britain won't give up on the war and will keep funding it and win it. And just to make sure that John and Hal play along, they're threatening to expose John's gayness, and they've got affidavits from one of John's old boyfriends and also the testimony of Percy Perseverance. So John is kind of screwed. Only, he has an idea, and a nail, and a ring, and then passes that nail to Percy and tells him to give it to William, and only to William. And all that happens before the credits have even rolled. And 7 weeks later, yes, really 7 weeks later, Jamie, Claire and William ride home, and Pigsty tells them that John for sure is gone, but is gone mysteriously. But somebody left a parcel. Turns out it's the blackmail letter, and they clock what's going on, and they see Percy's name, and they go to his place, and they rough him up. And he tells them that he doesn't actually know where John is because he was blindfolded, but he does know it was a boathouse. And luckily the ring, turns out, has Pharos scratched in it, which turns out means lighthouse in Greek. There you go. And they find the lighthouse, and they immediately spot Richardson outside, chilling out, having a wee bit of fishing. So Will and Jamie decide to go off and do an Apocalypse Now kind of bit, and they malky the guards. Then they free John, they have a bit of a hug, and then Claire captures Richardson at gunpoint, and they tie him up. And at this point they realise they probably should check there aren't any more guards lurking around, so the three men go out baddie hunting, and that leaves Claire and Tricky Dicky to chat. And that turns out that he's actually a time traveller, and he was just trying to continue the war because he actually wants to end slavery, because he knows that obviously there'll be Jim Crow and everything like that in America after the end of the war. So because one of his ancestors was a slave woman, he wants to end all that. So him and Claire debate about whether time travel's possible and talk a little bit more about what she's been through, and eventually she gets him to agree not to hurt anyone else, and she unclips him. And the second he goes out the door, boom, gets headshotted by John. Alright, what a shame. So they all go home, and then for some reason Jamie starts being a pompous arse, because the script needs to bring up this whole marriage and infidelity thing again.
I have had carnal knowledge of your wife.
But after a wee chat, they finally make friends, and they start playing some chess. Meanwhile, Bill and Claire have a bit of a chat about how having two dads is actually a good thing, because it turns out pretty much everybody in the show has a biological dad and an adoptive dad. And then later William and Pigsty have a chat, and he tells her, yeah, it's never going to happen between the two of us. And she's like, oh, okay, whatever. And to tie everything up neatly, Lord John goes to Percy's office and then tells him that he can either sign away this document or he's going to shoot him in the face. So Percy signs the document that says that all the gayness was in fact just lies and rumours and he made it all up. And then when John wanders off, Percy takes himself out the easy way. With a bang. And then back at the Ridge, once everybody's home, Brianna turns out she's already had a baby named Davy Ian William Fraser, Roger Jamie Claire Frank, Jim Beckley, Kirk, Spock, Sam Beckett, McSprocket, or anyway. She and her dad have a big heart-to-heart, and he explains that he's going to go off to King's Mountain because he has to, and the audience might have forgotten that that's the one plotline left in the show. But before we can get there, there's a wee scene of Claire writing in her notebook, and Jamie comes in and he wants a peek. At the book, not her. Get your head out the gutter. It seems that apparently she's writing Outlander, the book. Because we're doing that old cliche. I mean, why not? And then Fat Bastard rides up and tells Jamie that it's King's Mountain time, and Claire gives a kind of flat final voiceover, because of course, the show is all about her, remember? Did you forget? I certainly did. End of episode. So what did I think? Well, this was kind of a mixed one. Now, I'm not going to bury the lead here. This is definitely a bit of a filler episode. It's not even the kind of penultimate episode that you used to get in like Game of Thrones and things, or Stranger Things, where it's setting up everything for the finale. This is absolutely more of the opposite, which was, let's have a few thematic conversations and then tie up every bloody loose end that's still left in the show, which they've been doing now for a couple of weeks. But on the other hand, it's not a bad episode in its own terms. I mean, it's not great, and we'll get to that, but I didn't actually hate it. So, one thing I do want to point out before I get into all the actual stuff in the episode was something I noticed in the opening credits. Now, you might have noticed, if you're a careful viewer and didn't skip past them, that the last shot before you see the Outlander stones has been different every single week this season. So, in episode 1, it was a shot from season 1. Episode 2, it was a shot from season 2. Episode 3, it was shot from season 3, etc., etc. But, of course, there's only 8 seasons of Outlander, and this is episode 9. And the final shot was Jamie and Claire. And at first I thought, oh, that's them on the ridge, in reverse. But then I realised, no, it's not. That's them on King's Mountain. Now, Jamie went to King's Mountain on his own, scouting out the place a few episodes ago. So the question is this just a random shot of the pair of them, or is this actually a bit of a spoiler that everything's going to be fine, and he's going to be fine at King's Mountain, or it might even be them before the battle? Who knows? I guess we'll find out next week. Also, I'm really curious, what's going to be at the shot in episode 10? That's assuming there's even going to be a credit sequence in the episode at all. But back to the main episode. Starting out, I want to give fair praise to herself, as she's the one who wrote this episode. This is the Diana Gabaldon episode. And in as much as any one writer writes an episode in a show like this, with writers' rooms and everything, this is hers. And for any faults, which I will get to, there are some things I didn't like. She does know how to write good character conversations, spin melodrama, and build a little bit of tension. And I thought most of the scenes in the episode, which, to be fair, most of the episode was just 2 or 3 people sitting in rooms having conversations, which is becoming a bit of a problem in the show. But they all worked fine. None of it was dull, but everything served some level of story purpose. And more than that, there were some pretty good performances this week. I mean, solid stuff as always from Sam and Kat. I mean, lots of meaningful looks and small moments. They can kind of do this in their sleep, even when they're being asked to do things that are a bit silly, like this bit. And also, John Berry got to do some stuff this week, It was good that the opening 10 minutes of pre-credit stuff was all John and Richardson, and it was not bad. It was like a little stage play, and I was quite captivated by it, even though the storyline itself feels a bit weird and rushed. But yeah, all of the Richardson stuff in general was actually pretty interesting. I think this actor did pretty well with it. I can't remember his name, but yeah, the scene with Claire and him debating time travel was pretty good, and it could have been even more of the episode. Hell, I mean, I wish we'd had more of this guy throughout. It really would have helped the show massively if they'd had like an opposing, but not evil, just kind of like a Magneto and Professor X kind of yin and yang. Not generally a bad person, just somebody with very different views, sort of time traveller person. Although there is something I'll mention later in that regard. Now, Richardson had interesting ambition. I mean, his goals are fairly noble because he's just trying to get rid of slavery. He's also the great-grandson of a slave woman, so he wants the slave trade ended. And his plan seems a bit naive and simple. I mean, assuming that colonial rule in the Americas would just make everything fine. I mean, yeah, it might have made everything terrible. Who knows what would have happened? The domino effect, the butterfly effect, all these effects. Anyway, time travel stuff. I find it interesting. But we only really got a quick outline and not an awful lot of info, especially about him, because then he got dead of a poor choice of exit. But also, this kind of felt like a week where there were a lot of scenes and a lot of conversations, but not a huge amount happened in terms of the ongoing story. Which kind of leads me into the problems. Okay, so first off, I was pretty surprised that this was a fairly short episode, at only 53 minutes, which most of the season has been over an hour per episode. And watching it, it's not like they really needed more time. And that's not because it was a terribly badly paced episode, but it also meant that a lot of the stuff here was kind of flimsy and ephemeral. I mean, yes, Lord John's kidnap is a decent story point, and it is a problem that needs to be overcome, but it also has felt like a last-minute storyline that wasn't a big deal, because they threaded the whole thing about Richardson so poorly throughout the season. I mean, it was just always this background thing that Lord John was sort of talking about occasionally that felt like it was not anything, largely because Richardson is such a non-entity in the show. I mean, I actually didn't realise that Richardson had been in the show so much. He was in like 6 episodes in season 7, and I remember him from about 2 minutes, which shows the character was not doing its job. And I also never really felt like anything in this episode was going to build into something major. I mean, they were never going to kill off a big character. I mean, I'd had a moment of thinking maybe they might have. But no, I don't think this show's doing that. I mean, they killed Fungus the other week. I think that's it for this season. But also, 7 weeks have passed. I mean, John's supposedly been in this thing for 7 weeks. He's still wearing the same clothes. They don't even really look that dirty. And he's grown a beard. But other than that, I mean, you know, if you've been chained up for 2 months and a thing, you'd probably take your shoes off. You would probably have a blanket or something like that. I mean, if he's literally been sat on that, he'd be pretty much crippled if he's just been hanging there in the corner. Yeah, it's a TV show. But also, I get that the 7 weeks, that's realistic, because travel takes a long time. But what have the bad guys been doing? I mean, literally, they've just been hanging around, waiting for what? For somebody to send the stuff that they sent to John's house on and post it to Hal. I mean, why did they send it to John's house anyway? I mean, I think Hal's house is technically the one they're staying in, but he's plainly not there. I mean, or is it just good luck that in all the 7 weeks they were away, nobody bothered to forward on that package until Jamie and Claire arrived? Seems weird. Seems poorly explained. And I am glad that they had this whole bit to show that John has proof that everything was bollocks at the end. So that, you know, this isn't something that's going to loom over the show. It is a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card. But that also didn't really work for me very well, because they explicitly said earlier that if this guy was dead, things could be denied and they didn't have any power over John. So doesn't that also work the other way for Lord John's affidavit? Because the other guy's not dead, and is he presumably not being held by someone? I mean, that's assuming there aren't more conspirators. Also, like, the slight annoyance, not at the show specifically, but at the show's content warning literally said that there was going to be a suicide in the episode, which made me momentarily think that John might kill himself but with that nail, but then I realised, no, that's never going to happen. And then it was obviously only ever going to be this guy. Because what is the point in his character? He's a coward, and he hangs around in this office, and he fancies John, and that's his entire character. Also, maybe I missed a trick, but how come Claire and Jamie realise instantly who he is from his alias? I mean, have I forgotten a scene where they met this guy and he mentioned his other name? I mean, probably. But again, there's so much to do with these storylines that feels that it's forgettable and it's vague. And that could just be because, you know, this is a TV show where a lot of this stuff just gets mentioned very briefly. Whereas in a book, you would read it so you would remember it better. But I don't know, it could also just be because I feel vaguely disconnected from a lot of it at this point. Also, weird side note. So, somebody in the comments years ago said, pay attention to the guy attacking Brianna back during this bit. Now, I didn't look into that too deeply because I just didn't recognise the guy and I didn't want to check any spoilers. Now, obviously, Richardson's dead now, so I looked up his character. And apparently, yeah, he was 100% was one of Rob Cameron's dudes, which opens a whole can of questions that the show either has forgotten or wasn't that interested in, because looking at it now, so I didn't recognise him at the time, that asks a whole load of other questions, because then was he part of Rob Cameron's crew? Was he only after the gold? Did Rob Cameron somehow get in touch with him? So is he from the 1980s? We don't find out any of this stuff. I mean, essentially, it sounds like we've had a whole character who has essentially been doing his own kind of like time-travelling thing, a bit like that movie 11/22/63, you know, where the guy goes back in time to try and stop the Kennedy assassination. And this guy instead is going back in time to try and end slavery. And it just ends with him dying crappily. I mean, it's kind of a wasted opportunity. And I feel like had the show gone on longer or been better put together and better thought out, we really could have had this character popping in and out, being much more relevant, being much more memorable. You know, it's sad that they have clearly laid some groundwork and they fumbled it, like they fumbled so many other things in this show. Now, I am totally here for the time travel stuff, and maybe this is on me because I just missed it or I wasn't paying enough attention to it, but who knows. I feel like this episode really also rushes a lot of stuff in silly ways. Like, yes, weeks have passed, but the good guys managed to find the place in seconds, kill the bad guys in moments with no difficulty, stand around like they haven't got a care. I mean, Claire sneaking up on Richardson in the reeds. I mean, she just She just literally hoiks her skirt up and do-do-do-do-do, and she's there, and he doesn't hear her until she clicks the gun. And then the insane moment when she just lets him go, and he just walks out the front door, and neither one of them thinks to even mention or think about the fact that there's 3 guys who have every reason to kill him, wandering around outside in the broad daylight, and who know nothing about the fact that they just made that agreement. Now, sure, they can't explain everything to John and William, but this felt like Claire just doing a total Claire and making a decision without thinking it through or asking anyone else, and oops, somebody died as a result. And that's happened a few times in the show. Maybe that's because this is an episode written by Diana Gabaldon, and she has written this whole book series about a character who constantly thinks that she knows better than everybody else and makes quite a lot of decisions that are poorly thought out, and that's happened since season 1. And it's good to know that Claire hasn't learned or grown in that regard ever. That's who she is, that's who she's always going to be, and we've just been reminded about it. And a man who had very noble goals of saving the world from slavery just got dead because of it. And that kind of bugged me because it was also kind of stupid, because the second he walked towards the door, I was like, hang on a minute, you're just going to walk outside there in front of like that, you know, those guys are going to, he's going to get shot, isn't he? Blam. Yep, and I was right. Now again, that's partly on the script, it's also partly on the director, which is a bit worrying because this is a new director who is doing this episode and the finale, and has previously only ever done some episodes of Blood My Blood, which I haven't watched those episodes, and a few other TV shows that I haven't watched. Maybe they're a great director, but this does not inspire confidence. It inspires thoughts of mediocrity and little more. Also, I mean, other silly little things like, look, okay, John didn't blot the ink on the letter, so that would just be a big smudge now. So it would just be a mess. And also, like, John still has no servants in his house. And, like, the door being open, it just seems really weird to me and really silly, because he's supposed to be like rich nobility. So he has to open his own door. Like, yeah, I've gone over that before. It's just, it feels silly. So much stuff in this episode just felt a little bit naff, a little bit rushed, and it's a shame. And I worry because, you know, as I said, next week is the end. And it's a shame if this episode was kind of forgettable fluff. What does that say about the finale? Is it going to be everything or nothing at all? So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us at the precipice. I mean, next week is literally the big finale. And at present, there are some rumblings that it's going to be an extra length episode, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. Not confirmed, but that would make sense. And the next week on preview scenes, they don't really show much, other than the whole Ridge crew is basically going to head to this battle, apart from maybe Brianna, who's going to be at home with the Bairns, but I understand them not really wanting to show much. And I would hope that since they cheaped out on most of the action scenes this season, they will try and make this wee skirmish in the hills a decent battle. But I mean, I've been wrong before, especially the last few seasons. They haven't been great, the battles have all looked a bit dull and naff. To be honest, since Culloden we haven't really had anything great. And I feel like it's going to go exactly as predicted, in that either Jamie's going to get really badly hurt, or he's going to get full-on killed. And then Claire's going to have to do a magical force heal on him, and how that's going to play into the wider story, or ties up the real outstanding question, which is, why does Jamie's ghost appear in Inverness in episode 1? It's just really hard to say. Although I'm still fingers crossed that there's going to be a secret Tobias cameo somewhere. Chances are unlikely, but I would be really happy if it does happen. And yeah, I'm kind of in a strange place with this, as you know, I've been making these videos for basically about 12 years. Seriously, that first episode review back in 2014, that was, you know, a million years ago when we were all young. And next week, this is going to be it. And I'm not sad. Like, it's a weird feeling, but the show has unfortunately disappointed me in a lot of ways over the last 3 or 4 seasons, and I'll be honest, if I was not reviewing it, I probably wouldn't be watching it. I did promise myself I'd review every episode of this by the time we got to season 3 or 4. I just went, no, this is silly, I'm sticking this out to the end. But yeah, unless I get hit by a bus some point next week, then next weekend, you'll be watching me talk about the very end of this. And after that, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll probably talk about that more next week, because this has been a serious chunk of my life, and presume yours as well, if you're a big Outlander fan. Or heaven forfend, if you're just somebody who likes my silly videos. Well, thank you very much for being here. But yeah, I'll talk about that next time. But it's a weird feeling to feel like we're here with only one episode left. And I think it's strange because I both feel like I know what's going to happen in some ways, and at the same time, I haven't got a clue. I really have no idea what next week's going to be about. But anyway, considering there is a whole book after this that hasn't been released yet, and I presume this is just going to be we'll draw a line, call it a day, and then maybe have a bit of a montage of what everybody got up to at the end. Who knows? Let me know in the comments if you have any kind of thoughts about that. I mean, but please, don't drop any big book spoilers about what happens in the book. We can talk about that next week. You can leave comments about that once I've seen the finale. But if you've got any thoughts about how you think the episode is going to do anything, or how it's going to tie this story up in some kind of way, yeah, feel free to drop that in. I'm quite happy to hear theories and random thoughts. Let's see if we can all make it to the finish line without any huge surprises being ruined. But until next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.